Ciao everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Superhuman Podcast. I am your host, Renato Capasso, and together we will talk about the latest biohacks and scientific discoveries that will turn you from a human into a superhuman. And it all starts now. Hey there, welcome to this new episode with Dr. Jenny. So Dr. Jenny is my functional doctor, and I believe is one, if not the best, functional doctor in Australia. And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. We're going to talk about functional medicine and how you can benefit from it. We're going to have a particular focus on the gut, and you will be literally blown away on how many things the gut can affect. How fixing your gut problem can have a devastating positive effect on your overall health. Did you know that some of the bacteria, if not most of the bacteria, can have also an effect to your neurotransmitters and your mitochondria, and that a very big, a good percentage of your genetic code is from those type of bacteria? So we're going to talk about this, about sleep patterns, what to eat, what not to eat, glyphosate, gluten, and much more in this episode. So please stay tuned and enjoy this episode. And thank you very much for joining the podcast. You are the first.
Oh, this is my pleasure. This is lots of fun.
You are the first of the guests that I actually have met, because all the guests that I've interviewed so far, I know them remotely and I know their work, but you're the first one who I've met. And I know you very well. I really believe you're the best functional doctor in Australia, if not the best doctor in Australia. And it's true. You're the person who really changed my health for the better. But for those who don't know you, would you like to tell a little bit more about you and your background and what you do?
Okay, so I'm a doctor. I was trained in Australia. I was born and raised in Melbourne. I went to a very good medical school called Monash, and I was always very, very healthy and very interested in preventative medicine. I used to be a runner. I was always interested in nutrition, long before nutrition was considered very important. My father was a doctor. He was also very interested in nutrition. When I went to medical school, I was shocked that we learned nothing about nutrition and nothing about preventative medicine. And it was only about diseases and the drugs for the disease. So when I finished medical school, I started learning other things. Now, I'm pretty old. I'm almost 60. So back in those days, it was the 80s.
Is it really? Are you
Yeah.
almost 60? You don't look like that age at all. Okay, another
It's
reason
true.
to follow you.
So back in those days, we didn't know a lot. We didn't know about the microbiome, but there were small ideas about how you could improve your health through nutrition. We were starting to learn about vitamins and things like that. So I did my training, and I was a preventative medicine doctor back in those days. I then left Australia. I got married, had kids in America, and came back to Australia with my kids, not with the husband. But anyway, I had to start from scratch. So for some years, I couldn't afford to work as an integrative doctor. But then when I established myself and I was able to upgrade my training properly, I could afford to do it full time. So I'm both an ordinary GP, and I also have a fellowship in nutritional and environmental medicine. And I'm also on the board of a group of doctors called ACIDS, which is the Australian Chronic Infectious and Inflammatory Disease Society. And we try to keep at the cutting edge of what's known about gut health and other chronic issues that affect our health. So I'm busy learning stuff all the time. And the difference, I would say, between an integrative doctor and a conventional doctor is that we are trying to keep at the cutting edge of what's known so that we can help our patients as best we can all the time. Whereas in the conventional medical world, you wait for a new drug and then the rep tells you about the drug. And it's a bit of a backwards way of going about it, if I might say that. So that's me.
That's great. That's great. And, I really, for those who listen to the podcast, I really am up for more functional doctors and more doctors like you available to people. I mean, it's my personal story, but, I'm not the only one who just changed their health for the better. For me, it's just a no-brainer, right? So the difference between you, and I don't want to criticize anyone here, right? I just, making a statement. I remember when I met you, and basically, how many tests have you have we done? Probably like 20 over 20 and over test. However, and can be a little bit, overwhelming maybe at first, especially for someone who is not used to it. But you found out about me so many things that I just was given for granted. I was given for granted about my sinus. I was given for granted about my bowel syndrome and other stuff until we tested it and we cured it. I think you've done a little bit of an introduction also of what's the difference between a functional doctor and an ordinary, let's call it like this, doctor. But do you have anything more to add about the difference between a functional doctor?
Yes, so the practice of integrative medicine is really trying to find the underlying cause of why the person is unwell. And for example, a problem with your microbiome can cause a headache. Now, if you go to a conventional doctor, they'll treat your brain, and they'll look at brain causes because you've got the symptom there. Similarly, you could have overactive mast cells, which could cause pins and needles in your hand, whereas your local GP is going to look for something structural there. And if they don't find something structural there, they're going to say, well, you're making it up or you're crazy. So it's a very different way of approaching medicine. And so it's finding the underlying problem, and the underlying problem may be very far away from where you think it's going to be. So it takes a little bit of a leap of faith when you see an integrative doctor, because they're going to come up with very unusual things compared with what you're used to. So that's a very important point. And I would say there's nothing in what I do that isn't involved with nutrition. So you really can't fix anybody. You can't make anyone's health good unless their nutrition is optimized. And it's quite hard nowadays to have optimal nutrition. Hard for a number of reasons. One, because we're used to having a lot of pre-prepared food. We're used to having food that isn't made from basic natural ingredients. Sometimes we've forgotten how to cook. There are lots of barriers. So most people don't have optimal nutrition. And I have to sadly say, because farming is, treacherous in Australia, and we try to grow things and raise things that aren't so suitable for our climate, farming practice has to be quite harsh to the soil. And so after, a couple of 100 years, our soils have been depleted. So we don't necessarily even have the vitamins and minerals in our food. So that's a big challenge. So to get all of that right takes quite a lot of effort. So I would say, as well as looking at any kind of illness or disease from a general point of view and what's causing the underlying problem, we look at nutrition in all of our patients.
That's very good, even because I think a lot of people have, me included, okay, they have an assumption that a certain food and a certain things is healthy for them. So, you hear more and more people saying and strongly believing that they're eating healthy, while at the end they are not. Do you have any, probably, what do you think are some common examples of things that people consider to be healthy, and in the end they are total opposite then? and healthy food?
Okay, well, yes, I have to start by saying,
Yeah.
I'm not happy that certain things aren't healthy. I wish they were. I wish people could go and have whatever they liked and whatever they enjoyed, and it would be perfectly fine. So sometimes patients feel as if I get a secret pleasure from denying and depriving, but it's not true. But I would say one very good example of something that people think is good for them but isn't are cereals and mueslis, and even, sadly enough, sourdough bread. People often think that's good, and unfortunately all of those products have gluten in them, and gluten, particularly in Australia, is very inflammatory to the lining of our gut, and also increases the permeability of our gut. Now, if you want to know what that means, we assume that the lining of our bowel is watertight. We think of it like a hose, and, stuff goes in the mouth and, out the anus, and the nutrients get absorbed, but all the chemicals and all the rubbish just goes shooting through. Unfortunately, if you don't have the right diet, little gaps form between your cells and allow a lot of the chemicals in the food that we eat, the things we didn't want to absorb, right through into the blood vessels lying below. So instead of us having a really fantastic defense against all of those things, we don't. There's a protein called zonulin, and zonulin is responsible for opening up these gaps. And zonulin, from an evolutionary point of view, was designed to open up the gaps, to let our artillery out when we were being invaded by a bacteria inside our gut. Nowadays, we don't get invaded by bacteria very often. So when zonulin opens up those channels, all the bad stuff comes rushing in instead. So gluten grains, unfortunately, particularly in Australia, as I said, because we've genetically modified our gluten so that it really increases zonulin. So I would say that's a big problem. And another food that can be a problem, not for everyone, but it can be, is dairy. So some dairy can be fine. But when people have any kind of autoimmune disease or allergy, we know that all dairy, the protein in dairy, which is casein, upregulates that immune response. So it's not very good.
Okay, so the dairy causes, let's say, inflammation. If we can kind of summarize it in a nutshell in very simple terms, no? The dairy can cause ultimately inflammation, but you said before that not all type of dairy. And why is that? What type of dairy for people?
Okay, so dairy can be divided into that has bacterial cultures in it, like yogurt and kefir and some cheese, and dairy that doesn't have bacterial cultures in it, like milk and cream. So dairy that has bacterial cultures in it is much less inflammatory and can be healthy for anyone unless they have autoimmune disease or allergy.
Okay, okay, perfect. And the other question I wanted to ask you, and then I'm going to jump quickly into dairy. For gluten, you said sourdough, like you said two things. The first thing is that gluten, particularly in Australia, but then you answered that things because it's genetically modified. And then the other things I wanted to ask you, if I was going to buy the flour and make my own sourdough bread with a very long fermentation, let's say 24 hours plus of fermentation, would that help to reduce the effect of gluten?
It would, but it wouldn't take it away completely.
Okay.
Now, if you had that sourdough bread and you ate completely organic food, which hadn't even touched the non-organic food, which I can tell you is very difficult. But let's say you were living on your own place and you were growing your own food, so you didn't have to worry about chemicals, then your sourdough bread would be fine.
Okay. So
So
that's the real problem then, is the way is farmed. It's not the grain itself, it's the way it's been.
well, if you make the sourdough that's been fermenting for so long, so it's less inflammatory, worry about when your gut is a little bit more leaky, then I think you'd be fine. So you're right. A lot has to do with the fact that we're in a big chemical soup.
Very, very true.
And in Australia, our grains are farmed using Roundup, and that's another dimension of misery, because Roundup is glyphosate, and glyphosate actually is a carcinogen.
Yes, that was going to be my next question. I'm glad that that you brought that up. So glyphosate is used as why is that used in the first place? Is used to because I know it's illegal to be used in certain countries, but it's not in Australia. And
The EU doesn't allow it. So the EU is light years ahead of Australia in terms of their understanding of environmental problems in every area. The EU is way ahead of us. So the reason why they use the glyphosate is that it kills the plant.
Okay.
When you're harvesting it, you don't need a live plant. So it dies, it falls down, and it gets harvested so much easier. It's a time saver.
Is a time saver. That's the only reason why they use it. And why is this so bad for us? What does it do in addition to the things that you said before? Why is so bad, the glyphosate?
Okay, so glyphosate, number one, in and of itself, glyphosate, so let's say you have glyphosate on your vegetables, not even eating gluten, it's in itself, it destroys tight junctions.
Okay.
So it doesn't even, it's not because it raises zonulin, it's a completely unregulated destruction of tight junctions. It just causes a chemical kind of a damage. And it's a carcinogen because it causes the substitution of one amino acid for another inside the nucleus.
Okay, wow. And that stuff is legal to use in Australia at the moment?
Absolutely. It's used constantly.
My God. That would explain why. So I travel in Europe quite often because by being Italian, I try to be in Europe at least once a year. And that would maybe explain why if I eat my bread and pasta in Naples, which is the city where I'm from, I do not have the same, first of all, bloating effect. And then that would explain it because the flour.
100%.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I have to practice what I preach. So I try to go to Italy as close to every year as possible. Won't be this year, but anyway. So I don't have bread and I don't have pasta, but I know if I did, I'd be fine. And I do say to my patients who are traveling to Europe, if you're going to have a little bit of the wrong thing, that would be, if you're going to Italy, definitely that would be the place to have your little bit of pasta.
That's great. And I think that explains what you just said. That explains a bit, that gives a big lessons of, and a big misconceptions of people that they think, not all meat is the same, not all bread is the same, not all dairy is the same, and so on. So just by the fact that you said that an ingredient might be healthy, you need to see a lot of things. You need to see what chemicals have been sprayed on top. How is that? Was that raised? Was it processed or not? So there is way more than the ingredient itself.
Yeah. I think the country that would be the absolute worst would be the USA. Mm-hmm. Would be the absolute worst for the most pesticides, animals brought up in feedlots, given the worst kind of inappropriate diet, everything is absolutely the worst.
Wow. Yeah, that's really shocking. For me, just the idea that something is illegal in another country and is legal in others, that will say already everything. But I like to just, so I think we opened the intro to talk a little bit more about gut health. So what you just said, basically, so what we put in our body has an effect in our gut, but ultimately our gut has an effect all over our body. And this might be surprising for a lot of people, which may consider gut one thing. I don't know, if I have an headache or brain fog, that's my brain, that's my head, it's not connected with the gut. How is that? Would you like to explain a little bit more what can be some of the things that gut health can bring to?
Okay, so look, this is the most amazingly large topic, but if we sort of break it down into different concepts, first of all, the bacteria in the gut are responsible for making a lot of very important compounds. The first thing is that they make a lot of neurotransmitters. So GABA is made in the gut, serotonin is made in the gut, a lot of neurotransmitters. The next thing that they make are the enzymes that make our mitochondria work. We all know that the mitochondria are the organelle in the cell that create energy. So the bacteria help to push that energy cycle by their products. Bacteria inside the gut make vitamins and hormones. So they're responsible for producing a lot of different things that the whole body needs. So
they can actually produce vitamins and hormones as well. Or
correct.
Wow.
Correct. Absolutely.
I'm taking notes while you talk.
Quite a large percentage of our vitamins are either activated in the gut by our bacteria or made. So it's very important. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the cells lining the gut sample what the bacteria are and send signals to our immune system on the other side, telling the immune system whether we're in good shape or not. And if we're in good shape, the signals go round through the blood into the brain to say things are good, we will feel well, we'll feel happy, our brain will be sharp. If things are not, then we will get the signal to make certain proteins called cytokines. They reach the brain, they tell the brain that things aren't going well, and we feel anxious, depressed, foggy in the brain. So there's a direct communication through these cytokines from the inside of the gut right to the brain. There are other immune functions that the bacteria in the gut make. For example, certain bacteria that we should have in our gut, and some people don't have enough of them, can stimulate the production of antibodies. Not just antibodies to pathogens that could invade the gut. We're not just talking about a gastroenteritis, but we're talking about viruses. So our immune response to having a virus can be made better if we have enough healthy bacteria. So what we eat will ensure that we have, number one, enough bacteria. So I do a test on the number and the kind of bacteria in the gut called a GI map test. And the most common problem that I find is not enough variety, not enough numbers. That's the biggest problem that I find.
Not enough, both variety and number of bacteria.
Both. Not enough number altogether, but also not enough variety. So you need a lot of numbers, but also a lot of variety. If you have just lots of the same, you won't get all the different functions done.
Wow. And I believe the not enough bacteria itself, the not enough bacteria itself might be given by the not having enough, the overuse of antibiotics maybe. or other reason behind it?
Okay, so unfortunately, in Australia, there has been over the last 3 decades a complete abuse of antibiotic use, and that was my daughter checking to see what I was doing. Maybe my voice is a bit loud. So unfortunately, because when a patient goes to a doctor, this is a horrible thing to say, but the conventional doctor, they're under a lot of time pressure. They want to get through as many patients as possible. And there is a mindset, I must give the patient something. They must walk out with a script. And so I have patients who come back to me and they say, I went to my local doctor. He said that I had a virus and he gave me some antibiotics. Now we know that viruses don't respond to antibiotics. So if the doctor said that, there's no rationale. But unfortunately, because of this mindset, I've got to give you something. There's just been this abuse of antibiotics. And every time you take a course of antibiotics, you reduce the numbers of bacteria in your large bowel. And we now know that when you give antibiotics to little children and babies, you can destroy different strains and they can sometimes never grow back. So it's really very concerning.
It's very bad. And what's worst as well, because I know that sometimes you have to, sometimes you have to get antibiotics. However, I know that probably another mistake that they do, that after they prescribe antibiotics, either they just prescribe a generic probiotic, excuse me, a generic probiotic that can be, the word probiotic, like you said before, there are so many different strains of bacteria, and just, prescribing a probiotic, lactobacillus and whatever, is wrong. And what's even worse is sometimes they just give the antibiotic, full stop. Not thinking about restoring the gut bacteria in any other way.
So if I have to prescribe an antibiotic, and of course you do sometimes, then I think, what different bacteria is that antibiotic going to attack, and what either probiotic or prebiotic do I need to give to offset the damage, to mitigate against that damage? If every doctor prescribed that way, we'd be fine. But it often doesn't go that way. It's just a matter of hand over the prescription and don't worry about the consequences.
That's I know that's very, very unfortunate. What would be that opens. I know that the gut health is just such a broad topic, but for example, going back on the first point, bacteria makes neurotransmitters, and like GABA and so on. That's big, and that means it can affect also mood and behaviors of people, I presume.
Very much so. So look, that's a very well-researched topic. It's well-researched. There are thousands of studies that show that dietary modification is as effective in treating anxiety or depression as a drug, an SSRI or an SNRI. But unfortunately, when people go to the doctor and they say they're depressed or anxious, I wouldn't even say in 10% of cases, I wouldn't even say in 1% of cases, does the doctor ever say, well, what you're eating, if we changed it, might fix that. So if you can make more E. coli, then you're going to make more GABA, more serotonin, and you're going to feel a lot happier. E. coli, of course, likes all the healthy food, all the healthy food. But the bacteria that compete with E. coli love sugar and refined grains. So, of course, if you're not eating a very healthy diet, you're going to be feeding up all those competitors to E. coli, some of them even block what E. coli is trying to do.
Wow. Okay. And that's, is, and I just see a pattern. Now you are at my sixth interview, and I just see a pattern of all the bad things that sugar and gluten, but particularly sugar can do. Is there, so I'm just trying to think about questions that I have that people will make by listening to the podcast. No, and I have a few written with me that I'm going to ask you in a second. But let's say if before even going to a functional doctor or anything, I just want to decide to change my lifestyle, and I want to start implementing, first covering the basics and cutting the sugar, the gluten, and so on. But I want to also eat a little bit more probiotic food, like yogurt, for example. Do you have any suggestions of what to choose? Because saying eat yogurt or eat kefir is again very broad, because first of all, well, I would say just avoid the yogurt that have 30% of sugar in it. That's not yogurt, that's just like frozen ice cream. But different yogurts, they have different strains of bacteria at the back if you read the label.
Okay.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm going to be a bit controversial, and I'm going to suggest that people don't have probiotic foods to start off with, because number one, you don't really know what they're starting with in terms of their gut health, and actually it could make them feel so much better, but it could make them feel worse. So I would actually go very gently with any kind of probiotic food until after someone has had a couple of months eating very clean and trying to have as many vegetables as possible. And that would prepare their gut so that they're less likely to have any, bad reactions. And I probably would suggest a prebiotic. So prebiotics are substances that cause bacteria to grow more vigorously, and they're not food as such because we don't absorb nutrients from them. For example, fructooligosaccharides, xylo-oligosaccharide, galacto-oligosaccharide, these are prebiotics. We don't absorb them, they pass through us, but they encourage the growth of many different kinds of bacteria. And I would probably start with them so that you've got more bacteria there. And even with these prebiotics, I would start very gently. So one example is fructooligosaccharides. There's a brand that I often recommend called Source Naturals. And, there's a scoop is one serve, but I often say to my patients, just start with a quarter of a scoop, even an eighth of a scoop, a tiny bit. See how you feel.
That's good. I used that brand last year when I did all the treatment we do, and I have to say is that was not the only thing. And again, we like you said.
You did amazing work, Renato. You were fantastic.
Well, all I can say is that for people who are listening, to give some motivation. I mean, nobody should need motivation to be healthier, but to give them some motivation, I felt healthier overall. I've lost weight. I put more muscle. I had more motivation. My sinus, well, that was not with the gut, something else. My sinus problem were gone. My bloating was gone. I could go to the bathroom better. And, I could make a huge list out of it. And even surprisingly, because, forgive me the word, I'm a freak for this. I get tested a lot, but surprisingly, even value that I have very low, when I did my blood count, like testosterone, I was very, very low in testosterone, in iron, and in other nutrients. They were well back as normal. And all I did is following your protocol about looking after the gut a little bit more and putting things a little bit more into place. So there are, a lot of things, like you just mentioned, there are a lot of things that you can get back from it if you put a little bit of work. And that, to be honest, with me in particular, but I think with everyone, it just impacts your life for the better.
Look, you're a particularly motivated person So you're the kind of patient who's a complete joy to work with. But anyone, even if they're not so motivated, they still can improve their lot in life. And, you only get one chance. You can't go backwards and decide, well, I'll go back to when I was 5 years ago and I'll do better this time. You get one shot. So any improvements, any effort that people make, I think is worth it.
That is great. That is great. I won't take much more of your time because I know you're in a hurry, but I really want to ask you, because I've got a lot of questions for this. General question, but a lot of people ask me.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of people ask me, and one of these people is a doctor. And he asked me, how can I get more energy? And I know it's such a general question, but I know you touched mitochondria before, and I guess we can be connected to that topic, and you can give maybe some insights of what people can do to restore.
Okay, so yes, mitochondrial function is our energy, and the mitochondria are little, what we call organelles. So they're inside the cell and they line the inside. There are many in every cell, not just one or two. And there are various things that make the mitochondria work better. So one thing that makes the mitochondria work better is eating less often. Okay. So, when I was growing up, there was a lot of very successful advertising by the cereal companies to say that we needed 3 meals and we needed a couple of snacks and we needed something to munch on after dinner. And so we were being told that for energy, we needed to eat very frequently. But that's quite the reverse. So eating 3 times a day is fine if you don't have snacks between. Eating twice a day is even better. And if you can eat once a day, it's even better. So that makes the mitochondria work the best. Now, I don't tell all my patients eat once a day, because if you're starting from a position where you're not well, particularly if you've got chronic fatigue or any other condition, it's too much of a shock to your mitochondria if you only eat once a day. So I would say start with 3, then make 2 meals, maybe spaced at 11 o'clock and 5:30, and see how you go. So eating less frequently. We know that sugar and we know that insulin take a very big toll on the mitochondria. So if you eat a lot of sugar, your blood sugar levels are unstable. Yeah. It goes up, you need more insulin to get it down again. And insulin reduces something called AMPK, which mitochondria produce. And this AMPK is vital for how efficiently the mitochondria work. So ensuring that your blood sugar levels don't go up and down by what you eat and eating less frequently, very important. The next thing that makes the mitochondria work really well is exercise.
Exercise. Is there any particular type of exercise?
The best kind of exercise is weights. Weight training.
Okay. And why is that, if I can ask?
And because it's a combination of getting people working at their maximum effort.
Okay.
And also getting their heart rate up. So that combination is the combination that makes the mitochondria the most excited. So it's not to say that jogging isn't good. And I jog. When I finish with you, I'm going to be going for a jog. But I always do weights as well, because that just adds a little bit of an extra burst. So that's so what we eat and how we eat is very important, and exercise. Another thing that makes mitochondria work better is, and I'm not very good at doing this, but getting very, very cold. So if we go into an ice bath, that is a shock to the mitochondria. And again, it primes them. So as I said, I wouldn't lie to you.
Mhm.
I struggle with that one, but for other people who are more warm-blooded than me, that's another good thing. And the last thing, of course, is to ensure that your sleep pattern is really good. So a lot of people go to bed too late. After about 10 o'clock, you don't ever secrete as much growth hormone over the night as you would have if you went to bed before 10. So it's not a matter of, if I go to bed at 11 but I wake up later in the morning, it'll be just the same. There's a peak window, and if you don't get to bed before that, then the amount of growth hormone is never as much. And growth hormone in a grown-up is actually a repair hormone. So if you are repairing your body better at night, you're going to have much more energy in the day.
Repair hormone. I've got a lot of people asking. So I know sleep is another big topic. I won't go too deep into it, but is there anything, and I know that's very general to say, but is there anything that people could start doing in order to improve their sleep?
All right. So we know that if you have devices, EMF devices, Wi-Fi devices in your bedroom, your quality of sleep will be reduced. So you definitely want to clear that out.
Okay.
We know that if the room is not really dark and really quiet, you won't sleep as deeply. So you want to stop that. Okay. You definitely want to have some fat in your evening meal.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know
because fats get metabolized quite slowly, and that will ensure that your blood sugar levels don't drop and make you wake up, because when your blood sugar levels drop, your cortisol goes up and that wakes you up. So some of my patients actually finish their dinner with, a teaspoon or a tablespoon of nut butter.
Well, this is completely new. I had no idea about it. Okay, it's very interesting.
And there's actually a supplement that you can take. You can buy it on iHerb called phosphatidylserine, and phosphatidylserine can help to prevent your cortisol rising, and so you don't wake up in the wee small hours. So that's another little tip.
For cortisol, okay. Because that...
And the last thing I'd say is to do some form of chanting or meditation. Because that helps to put you into the parasympathetic rather than the sympathetic mode. Sympathetic is when we're, ready to rush into our day, and the parasympathetic mode is when we want to chill and relax. So if we do some form, even just 10 minutes, you don't have to do too much, that will prepare us for, feeling like we can go to sleep.
That's great. And now, I mean, there are so many apps out there to help you out to start. Ideally, you want to doing it without any device and so on. But to get people started.
Just to get started. I'm not saying to do it when you're in your bed, but you do it, in the lounge room, and then you go to bed.
And then you go to bed. Well, I know I need to, with you, I know I need to hold back, because otherwise I would ask questions until the morning. But I want to let you go, and because you touched a lot of topic as well. And while you were talking, I wrote notes so I can write show notes for the people who are listening, and maybe links and so on. But I know that a lot of people, some people are from US, but a lot of people are from Australia who listen to the podcast. And I know people will ask, in case they do, and they will, how can people find more about you?
I have a website. So my name is Jenny Bromberger, and if they just type in Jenny Bromberger, that website comes up. I will tell you that we have to be very careful about what we write on our websites. In Australia, there is quite severe censorship. So I would love to write a lot more, but if you write too much, it can be viewed as if you are giving medical advice, and that's not allowed. And, we're very restricted. So I apologize for that, but whatever I am allowed to write is there.
That's amazing. And to be honest, even if they type best functional doctor in Sydney, you'll come out. And I know because that's how I found you. You'll come out on the first. No, that's true.
You can't say that.
No, but it's true. If you type best functional doctor in Sydney, you are the first search result with heaps of
You're kidding me.
I'm very serious. So.
Well, I've never tried doing that.
That's better. It happens naturally. Jenny, I really want to thank you so much for your time, because I know you're very busy and you got patient, and it was a long day for you.
You're so welcome. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. I'll send you the link with the post once it's up. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye. Hey there. Thanks for listening. Before we conclude, I'd like you to remind you something very, very important. This episode, as well as this podcast in general, is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Listeners should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have. Please, if you have any medical condition, consult your physician first. Disclaimer given, I would love for you to subscribe to this podcast and to leave me a review. That will help me a lot. We're just starting out. We have already a lot of great interviews down the line, which you don't want to miss. So hit the subscribe button so you will get a notification for the next exciting episode. I'll see you next time.